In this third session of Module 1, I'm going to talk about the obstacles in learning and development which are created by autism. Now, once we understand these obstacles, then it'll be possible to work out ways of getting around these obstacles to help the child learn and develop. So what makes it difficult for the child with autism to learn and progress? Well, one is the obstacles that we are going to discuss, which are created specifically by autism. And the second is a group of behaviors which interfere in the child's learning. And that's another group of obstacles that we need to learn and understand. So what we are going to do is to look at two groups. One is the typically developing children, and we are going to see how typically developing children learn. And the second is that we are going to look at the reasons which make it difficult for children with autism to learn the same thing. One very important ability that typically developing children have is that they share their interest with others, and they share in others' interests. And that's how they learn. They're learning from others, and they're letting others know what they're learning. And what is happening with children with autism is that they have a difficulty in sharing their interest with others and in understanding how others think. They do not pay attention to what others are interested in. And that's creating a major obstacle in their learning. They're not able to attend to the same thing, the others are talking about it, and they're not able to learn about it. Typically developing children frequently try to communicate with others using words, sounds, or just gestures. They also learn from others' responses. So whenever they make an attempt, somebody responds, and they're learning from that response. Children with autism, on the other hand, they lack interest in communicating with others. And they have poor skills in communicating with others. And when they do communicate with others, it is much harder for others to understand what they're saying. So others are not responding. So they're not practicing their skills, and they're not learning from others' responses either. Typically developing children are always watching what others are doing. They're paying attention to them, and they're learning from them. Every time they watch somebody doing something, it is like a model for them, and they're learning from that model. Children with autism, on the other hand, they have limited attention. And they're also more self-oriented. And this limitation of attention, and they focus more toward themselves, it restricts their learning from others. Typically developing children pay attention to a lot of things, almost everything that comes their way. They look at it, they watch it, they learn about their function, they learn about its use, and they're constantly learning. Children with autism have limited interests. They're only interested in a few things. And they're also at times interested in some unusual things, like unusual shapes or colors or things from which they're not learning that much. And this restricts their learning further. When typically developing children interact, others respond to them. They praise them, they appreciate them. And this feedback from others encourages these children, and it motivates them to practice and to learn. And the more they do, more praise they receive, more they get motivated, and the more they practice, and the more they learn. Now, because of the lack of interest or unusual ways of interacting, children with autism do not receive the same kind of feedback. People often don't respond to them or do not praise them for it, and because they're behaving unusually. So they're not receiving that kind of praise. So they're not feeling motivated to practice. And this lack of praise, it creates further lack of interest in them. Now let's look at some of the unusual behaviors that interfere in their learning. Now one of these we mentioned earlier is children with autism have some strong and unusual interests, such as in some toys, such as trains or blocks or numbers or shapes. And that restricts, that comes in the way of their learning. It's not easy to shift them from their interest to something else. Children with autism also have many sensory behaviors. Now they are easily stressed or they are interested in certain kind of light or certain kind of look. So they'll either be over focused on looking at something intently or feeling or touching something, or they'll be scared or stressed by some sounds or certain lights. And in either of these situations, it is interfering with their learning. Children with autism also become easily excited. They are often quite anxious and fearful. And whenever that kind of emotional state is there, they find it hard to attend to things and they find it hard to learn. So we've talked about the strong or unusual interests that many children with autism have, some of the sensory behaviors, the mental states like becoming too excited or being anxious or scared, affecting their behavior and the behavior becoming challenging then. And that makes it even harder for these children to learn. So we've looked at these children's difficulties in paying attention, in being motivated, in not getting the right kind of feedback from others, and not having that kind of interest or skills to interact with others. And that further reduces their motivation or participation. And then some of these behaviors are further impeding their learning. So we have to think of these factors affecting children with autism when we start thinking about how to help them. In Module 1, I have talked about what is EmPOWER method, what is autism, and the obstacles that autism creates in children's learning and development. In Module 2, we are going to talk about how to create a profile of your child's strengths and needs, because that will be immensely helpful when you come to making a plan about how to help your child. We will also look at creating a stress-free or reduced stress environment for your child, because you've seen that when the environment is stressful, children are not able to pay attention and they're not able to learn. So we will do that in the Module 2 of the EmPOWER method.